right into this. Let me start off by saying that I have both my reference in front of me. One is my actual line drawing, and the second one is the actual photograph in front of me. I keep the line reference there just at any given time if I'm unsure about any line that I did put on the reference. As I'm tattooing, I'll just like to refer back to it, double check if I'm unsure about anything, and pretty much the rest of the time I'm just actually looking at the regular photograph. My reference that I am holding in front of me is the exact same size as what I'm tattooing. If on the skin I'm tattooing a 5x5 portrait, well, my reference is a 5x5 reference. The inks that I use are three different blacks that I use. One is a true black by Intense. The second one is from Kingpin called One, and the third is a Pelican ink. I like to consider my true black the darkest, which would be 100%. My One black I would like to compare to an 80%. And my Pelican I would like to consider anywhere from 40 to 60%. And when I'm comparing these three inks together, everybody's going to have a different opinion. They might think the One is the darkest. I'm just saying this is what works for me. So by all means, feel free to explore. Out of the three solid blacks that I'm using, I also add a fourth cap out, which is a 50-50 Pelican. 50% still water and 50% Pelican. When you're working with washed down inks, you're going to notice on the skin, you really don't get a chance to see the value. All you pretty much in the result get is a really redness, I want to say a Venetian brown tone. And that kind of replaces to the eye what you think is the actual value that you're putting in. And then when that person heals, you're going to notice anywhere from 40 to 50% of that ink has dropped out, and result leaving you a washed out tattoo. So that's the only reason why I use a 50-50, nothing less than that, because I don't want that kind of result. My technique is based on an oil painting technique that when I do my underpainting tone on my canvas, I work with one value, which is a raw umber. And to achieve the different values, I kind of, if I want a lighter value on my canvas, so I push very lightly onto the canvas. If I want a darker value added to that canvas, well, I push a little harder. And if I want a darker value, I'll just push harder, and etc. So I kind of applied the exact same method to my tattooing. If I want a lighter value, I let the needles just graze the skin, not going in deep at all, just literally grazing the skin. And if I want a darker value, I'll stick the needles in just a little bit more. And after a while, that, like say if I'm working with a Pelican, I can only achieve so much value before I'm actually damaging the skin. And if I have to go to a darker value after that, I'll work with the One ink, and if I want darker, I'll achieve it with the true black. So it's a combination of the inks being used, because each one does have a different value, and second is the pressure that I'm putting onto the skin. I'm using a sweeping right there, going back and forth, a sweeping motion, and I'm just grazing the skin. Now you can see there's a little value there. And right now I'm using Pelican, and again I'll go over the area. Even with a solid black, I got to go over the area a couple of times just to even build up the values. So you can actually work with a solid black, and if you're running off the tip of your needles, it will take you a couple swipes to go back and forth to build up the value. Also as well, I hold my machine straight up in the air. I don't hold it at a 45-degree angle. If you see right there in the video, my tip is straight up. I don't work on a 45-degree angle, and the reason for that is if I work my machine straight up in the air and I go back and forth, well, that gives me an even gradation. If I was able to hold my machine on a 45-degree angle, I would not get an even gradation. So I can't stress to you, when doing this method of tattooing, to hold that machine straight up in the air and work in that motion, in a sweeping motion, just like you see in the video. Right there, I mean, I'm just like really working off the tip of the needle. And if you notice so far, just look at the tattoo. There is no signs of any redness. Um, you can actually see the gray value in there. There's no redness to that tattoo at all, which I'm happy because I can see the actual value that I'm working with. Two, I'm not bringing any more trauma to that skin than I have to. As well, when I'm working, my paper towel, I always keep watered down, and especially when working with true black, it's a thick black to work with. And if you're using a dry paper towel and you're just trying to wipe that ink off, well, you're going to be wiping that customer a couple more times just to get the ink off. And as well, it's always when you water down a tattoo at any given point, and or using any green soap, it's just the customers always say that it's so soothing at that point. So throughout the whole tattoo, my napkin is just kept watered down, and like I said, it's just easier to take any excess ink off the skin. As far as machines, I'm using a Joshua Carlton machine called the Creeper, and that machine is pushing a number 12 long tapered 11 magneto, and I also use a linograph Mickey Sharp machine, which that is pushing a 5 bug pin outlining needle. And right there on the screen, that Hannibal Lecter piece that you're looking at, if you look at the eyes, that was performed with a 5 bug pin Mickey Sharp machine. The Mickey Sharp is sold as an outliner, but I also perform shading with it as well. How the needle's just grazing the skin. You can just look. I mean, I went over that area twice already, and just a small amount of value that's on the skin. Right now I'm building up the area with the Pelican ink. To me, I think this method is a really easy method, and I think you're going to find it very comfortable uh, to work with. I have taught a lot of my students this method, and they find it to be absolutely great, very easy to work with. And again, I mean, it does work. I mean, when that tattoo heals, it just looks so full and rich with all different values. Nothing gets washed out. I noticed that people do heal up a lot quicker. And I'm a firm believer that less trauma to the skin, the better. And with this being said, this DVD should be purchased that you've been tattooing 2 to 3 years with the experience in the tattoo studio. This is not to replace an apprenticeship. This is for people that feel comfortable holding a tattoo machine, that have experience. So, again, watching the DVD, you're just going to see the machine going back and forth. Never once do you see me going in a circle rotation. It's just a back and forth swiping movement. Like I said again, if a light effect, I'm going to use the tip of the needles on the skin. If I want to go a little darker in value, I'll keep the exact same sweeping motion, but just go a little more into the skin. Another thing that helps me out when I'm doing portrait work is actually squinting my eyes. And when you're squinting your eyes, what's that actually doing for you? It's helping you zero in on the value that you're trying to achieve. And it just pretty much knocks out the rest of the other values and lets you, just like I said, zero in on the value that you're working with, and without being so, I guess, overwhelming or intimidating. So definitely works great when you squint your eyes. At this point, I'm gonna step away from the mic a little bit and let you kind of absorb in what I've been explaining to you. again for the whole DVD. I'm just going back and forth, building up all different values. You'll see me work in an area, move on, come back to that area. It's just because I want to get to one area, get some value on there, move on, and again, put value in that area. This way I can always compare values. It definitely helps me out a lot. It's definitely always comparing different values. Because you can, if you just stay in the area too long, you can just get so lost in that little area, and then next thing you know, you just over pigment the area. So definitely a good thing to work in an area, move on, and then come back to it. Definitely work kind of really loose, basically. And I'm always constantly looking at my photo reference. Now here I want to bring in that nose. Looks just like a solid black blob. Um, Basically, what I'm including in the other DVD is when doing portrait work is that a helpful thing is seeing shapes. When you see shapes and not a nose, because a lot of people when they draw, they like to draw a nose. They see a nose. See, when I look at things, I see shapes, and a lot of people get into a habit. Um, just they get into this drawing method where they have this one nose or this one eye that they constantly draw, or this one um, egghead shape. They start off with an oval and start drawing it. If you get into that habit, you're gonna notice that all your noses, all your eyes, pretty much look the same. What I like to get into more is seeing the shapes. I believe if you see all these different shapes, you look at one person to another, the noses are not the same, the eyes are definitely not the same. So if you get into this habit of seeing shapes and don't see an eye, don't see a nose, just see the shape, you are going to produce definitely a lot better portrait. And because one nose is going to look so different from the other portrait you're doing, you didn't just get into this bad habit and every nose or every eye that you draw is the same. I'll definitely get more into detail with that later on in the DVD. But pretty much at this point, I'm happy the way the tattoo is coming out. It's actually starting to come alive at this point. So we're getting there. Here you can start taking a look at it. And I'm still working with my 11 mag. Again, at the end of the DVD, you'll see me go back into it with my bug pin needle, just to tighten up some of the line work that's in there. But we're definitely coming along. Well, I'm doing any kind of portrait work. You'll rarely see me put any line work in there. The reason for that is I like to keep the portrait nice and soft. Adding really hard lines around the face, you're just going to make it look cartoonish. Any line work that you see me put in the portrait, it's either pretty much going to be around the eyes, like with the eyelid, hangs over the eye, you get that little crease of darkness. That's pretty much it. I will not bloodline anything for the simple fact that if you do any bloodlining and when you start shading stuff in and you wipe that ink over that bloodline, well, that ink is just going to get right into that bloodline, and when it heals, even though it's so faint of a gray line, you'll see it. Your eye will definitely be drawn to it. So I don't do any kind of bloodlining whatsoever. If, God forbid, if I lost part of that stencil, I always keep this stencil handy. Like I said in the beginning, I keep that as my reference too as well. I will definitely cut the stencil in half and match up whatever part came off and reapply it, and then continue from there.